welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. Today, we're continuing our discussion on Street of Too Many Stories by Denise Chávez.
Hey.
Everybody get off your phones!
No, I'm just kidding. I was making sure it was almost silent.
Oh, I heard stories and I was checking my Instagram stories.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I'll cut that out. Right.
All right, so part 2, the
Yes.
second half of the novel. I almost said the collection again.
There's a collection of stories still in a way.
Yeah, collection
In
of
a way.
stories
Can
within
you
a
guys
novel.
hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Who said that?
You can see me?
Have you seen those pranks that they pull on little kids, or like they pretend they turn invisible?
Oh, I
and
hate
they just
those.
ignore them. It's pretty messed up. Like it's very
Yeah, that's
it's kind of
traumatic.
psychologically. I feel that fits into the story. That's why.
Yeah,
Is that how we
with
got there?
the spirits and stuff.
Family trauma.
What were you going to say, Raina, about the second half?
Nothing. I was going to ask, well, I guess the only thing I was going to say was about like the pacing, how that was different. How it felt like the second half moved along faster. I guess because everything's unraveling. But I don't know, what did you guys feel about the second half compared to the first half?
Yeah, I guess I would have to agree. Some of the chapters are written a little differently style-wise than they were in the first half.
Yeah, I definitely liked the second half better than the first. Like you guys were saying about the style, and it was a nice change of pace because of that too. So it made me get more into the stories.
Yeah, this kind of is an extension of what we were talking about beforehand. Just even when we were reading it, we were checking in on our progress, and it definitely picked up the second half. So see what we can talk about.
Reminding me of Ana Lopez's collection in the second half too.
Yeah,
Was that our last book?
it was.
It was, okay. See, that feels like so long
It feels
ago.
like so long ago.
Yeah, so I did feel some similarities there too, with pacing and the different stories. She gets a little more like experimental in the second half.
I feel like there's more dialogue in the second half.
Yeah, because in the beginning it's more like expository, I guess.
Yeah, and like more descriptions of conversations that have happened, but here it's actual conversations that we're seeing unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about Linda dealing with her trauma in the this is first in part 1 of this podcast, and I think we all kind of remarked on talking about stylistic change, the unhooking scene.
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
if you guys
that
had
was a good one.
Anything before that? I mean, before that, I thought there was an interesting section on page 89, a paragraph where it's a discussion like on pain and how we carry it. Of course,
Yeah,
it's Linda.
I had that one highlighted too.
Yeah, so before the unhooking scene, she talks about how she would journal and write to kind of help navigate those emotions. But there's that whole paragraph. Does life work that way? You carry the pain in the deepest core of your body cavity, and it rises as you confront the people who hurt you and who you hurt. They came up and get inside your head and start moving around until you tell them to leave you alone. Sometimes they do leave, and sometimes they don't. And when they do, you sleep. And when they don't, you get up and take your pen and a notebook, and you begin to write the story of the story. So it's kind of, I feel like there's a little bit of meta commentary too, just on the writing as healing a little bit. Which I think Denise Chávez is commenting on here as a writer.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that section too. It made me think of Cassie's book and just like other writers that we've read, how they use their writing as a form of healing, even though not all of them are based in like truth, I guess, or like a lot of them are fictionalized.
Oftentimes an attempt to explore intense feelings, right?
Yeah.
That are real.
Yes.
Yeah. I dig that. Yeah, and then I think the next section is the unhooking scene. What did you guys think about that?
Well, before that, I really liked how that chapter started on page 90. The fathers were never the stories. The fathers' stories are not what matters now. The fathers need a rest. They want to rest, and we need to let them rest. The fathers' stories are old, tired out, buried like the fathers. All the fathers are now gone, long gone, and the stories about them are history that has ended. The mothers' stories are still to be told, and the mothers do have some powerful stories. The children are what matter in this story. The children are who they are because of the fathers and the mothers, but it's more than that. It needs to be more than that. So yeah, I think like a lot with the voice and the urgency, I think starts to build here. We're not our mothers. We're not our fathers. And that paragraph ends like, when will we be free of our fathers, our mothers? I like that because it is talking a lot about like ancestors, but it's also talking about like breaking cycles, and it's also talking about like being our own selves. So I really enjoyed just like that whole section, right, leading up to the unhooking.
Yeah, that's the section I was trying to refer in the first episode, and I'm like, I couldn't find it. It's because it's in the first part of the second half. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that opening too, because I like how it says that it's not the father's stories who matter now, because I think especially like looking into a lot of older literature, it's more from the male perspective, and so like focusing on the telling of women's stories and the newer generations.
Yeah, matriarcado. I also I wrote in the margins like forefathers ? Because it also kind of to me alluded to that like
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole theme of the sense of the fathers here they try to break that cycle.
Yeah. I don't know why it just reminded me that like the beginning of the book, to me, there was this biblical style to it where you had like son killing or brother killing brother. I was thinking Cain and Abel. Kind of like it had this in the beginning type vibe, we didn't even talk about it. But yeah, that just reminded me of that as well. So is she talking to a therapist here? Is that what you guys got out of it?
Yeah, it felt like, well, I think
Or is it the narrator?
She's talking to like the
Is
ancestors.
it the Linda's talking to the ancestors?
But it feels like a therapy session.
The way it is phrased, right? The woman's words. Because I like that. I didn't consider it. I like that. Because I guess in that section, right, you have someone who's cutting away these threads, these hooks, and despite that, there's still residual leftover emotions that are tougher to get out, that are part of her. And that's I think at least Linda being really introspective about what's been done to her. It's also this section where we find out more from her perspective, because it's only hinted at in the first part, but it's pretty terrible stuff.
Yeah, and the image itself that it paints is, of course, very. I mean, there's like some, body horror, Clive Barkerian imagery, even though, I mean, horror itself is very much exploring, misogyny and, some of the similar themes, right? It also, of course, reminded me of, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is, also exploring that. And we do get like a hook scene in that one, too.
Wow.
But yeah, I definitely one of the stronger, like, visceral stories.
Yeah. So here, I mean, in this section, in this chapter or section, right, you have one of the more references to like what's unsaid or not willing to say. This even there's a name put to emotion, unspoken rage. The way Linda attempts to cope with it throughout her life, right? She talks about it: hypnosis, Reiki, diet, psychoanalysis, chocolate, booze, mota, sex, more sex. She tried them all, and it's not till later where I think she tries to go another way, which is forgiveness, but that's later on. So this is in New Mexico. There are several sections the way they talk about Mexicans. I don't know if you guys had anything on that, like the Mexican part of town, or like just people from Mexico. They kind of talked about it differently,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys had anything that you picked up or wanted to say about that.
I guess it's interesting to see because, like, I don't think of it that way. Like, like, I don't know, Mexicans and Mexican Americans are, in my mind, essentially the same. And then, like, the distinction of seeing one as better than the other or one as worse than the other is just, like, it doesn't make sense in my mind. But that's how they view it in the book, some of the characters.
Yeah, so, I mean, the reason why I'm thinking about this is you have the Adelaida who served the Stillmans, but ends up getting, like, picked up by, was it Letty's sister, Maggie? And it's her husband, Randy, who has these thoughts. And I thought it was kind of, like, funny, but in a, like, not, like, I don't agree with it way, but, like, that exactly is, like, people from Mexico, right? Usually Mexicans were hard workers. He didn't know about these half-assed people who said they were Mexican American or worse, Chicano, whatever that meant.
Yeah.
I thought that was a funny thought that he's threw in there.
Interesting commentary.
Yeah.
Also with like the commentary kind of with people who are gay.
Oh yeah. Well, Mundo's a homophobe, right? He doesn't want any male nurses working with him.
Yeah.
And he I think he even mentions that in the first section, right?
Yeah.
Which goes back to maybe that old school mentality, like not really being understanding or accepting.
Yeah, and it's also why a lot of the women weren't able to receive the care that they needed because their husbands didn't want them to have male doctors.
Male doctor, yeah. One of them also had a kid, right, who I imagine was trans. And they, as soon as they could, they like left and never came back.
Yeah.
It was the Stillmans. They had one of their children was a woman who acted like a man, right? Is the way they said it. So, yeah, this comes up a bit too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting commentary on these like topics and even like rape later on. And it does feel like the story, much like The Street, is holding like these huge topics, but we're getting just snippets of it. And like this could easily have been like a 300, 400 page novel, right?
Yeah.
But so it is interesting to kind of see how, or maybe the choices behind like why it was stripped down to 154 pages.
I mean, I think of the title, like too many stories. It's like too many stories to tell or really dive into.
Yeah.
It's like more of like these specific families in this specific time period. There's obviously a lot more, but there's too many stories. Here are some of them. Because there's a lot alluded to, like other families, other people end up moving into the neighborhoods like later on, different time periods. So there's those brief little explorations, but she really wanted to focus on the dynamics of like, I guess these ones that you mentioned here. I did like now I'm remembering parts on the first section we didn't cover. Because you did your presentation on Chuco Punk, and I here you have the Rasquache come up again, the theme, and that's when Mundo throws this party for a little Vicky, and he kind of uses this Rasquache to like make a rig so they can do the piñata. So I've always loved that term, the Rasquache.
Yeah.
And I tied it into right now when I saw the word Chicano in here, right? Like, I always like to use duct tape as like the Chicano superpower, right?
Yeah, like the jale chicano is like also known as kind of like rascuachismo, right? Like, you can just do a jale chicano and fix that broken mop or whatever.
Yeah.
And it usually does involve duct tape.
Yeah. It's like, I can rig something up. No problem.
Or the whole like no pasa nada when someone expresses worry about like I don't know,
No pasa nada.
yeah, like someone dying or getting hurt.
Kind of like equivalent of our like, it's all good.
Like when someone goes up on the roof to hold the piñata.
That I grew up with that, all the tios going up and pulling it in. Like, that took me back. All the food that they would have.
That's how we should celebrate our 5 years. Just have a piñata.
Yeah.
That'd be cute.
We read piñata poetry. We learned that they have feelings too, okay?
Piñata theory.
Was it?
Yeah,
Piñata.
piñata theory. Right?
Yeah, piñata theory.
Okay, but you have to think about it. Like in the piñata, we can get the like little mini books and put them instead of candy. It'll be little books.
Oh.
Oh, that's so cute.
Loteria. You could put like little games. That'd be fun.
Literary loteria. Literary.
Loteria.
Yeah.
No.
You took it too far with Loteria. Loteria.
I like that one
So
better.
like lots of lit.
Let's do it.
Lots of lit. All right. That passage on the sunsets was on page 100, by the way. The one I was talking about, like the way she described it, and she described it later on as well. But
Go ahead, Richie.
I think that would be a fun creative writing thing to do with students, like, because I think they are so evocative, and that's one of the things people always talk about in the region, like the explosive, like powerful cotton candy sunsets.
That's one of the good things that FitFam does. Sometimes they'll make posts of sunset.
Never heard of
pictures.
them.
Oh, ooh,
Just kidding.
not the beef. They're gonna come for us now.
I like following Christian churches. He has amazing videography and photography work of the city. I'm gonna plug him. Yeah. For you watchers out there, definitely. I think he does a great job celebrating the region.
Yeah.
Those sunsets in particular, and the star. And,
Nighttime photography.
It's really good.
No, but yeah, whether it's the sunsets, the pecans, right? The passage about the pecans and like all the things you make with them. Like shout out there to Cruces, right?
Have you guys ever cracked pecans?
My mom used to make us do that.
Yeah.
Little,
Did you have flashbacks when you were
Yes, I
reading?
did, because our fingers would get
Yes,
cut up,
yeah.
and I
They're sharp
remember
when you cut, break them.
my best friend and I can't believe I'm remembering this. Like in elementary school, like they had all the pecan trees. We went to La Union Elementary, and my mom would be like, okay, in our coats, like our winter coats, back then it used to be cold. Like we had big coats and like pockets, and I would get back home with like my pockets full of pecans. But my mom would be like, okay, now help me like shell them, and I was like, oh. Until like we started, using like whatever we had, like
Whatever tools,
the limon.
Yes,
What are
the
those
squeezer.
called? Yeah.
The little,
We would use those.
Yeah, we did those too. My grandfather had a pecan tree at his, so we'd always collect them. And I do just remember the cracking through
The
them. And,
nutcracker.
Yeah.
But
and just like, it's a very tactile thing. So when Adelaide here is like going through pounds and pounds of them, I'm like, damn, that's some work.
Yeah, PTSD.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work for like such a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bless you.
I'm a big nutty guy, so like I'm all about pecans, almonds, cashews, peanuts.
The nutty professor.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. You could say that.
Anyway, it's also in this section with that starts with the sunsets where Linda is remembering, like, at this point her father has passed, and so she's really having a hard time like reconciling with what he had done to her, but also their family, you know, that connection still. And I think it's a pretty heavy scene because in the end she ultimately realizes that she forgives, right? Forgiveness, right? That's page 103. Also, I think it's interesting how like it has to deal with like facing the directions. I know in a lot of like spiritualism, I guess, the cardinal directions have a lot of power behind them. So facing west, she feels a certain way. Facing east, I think some of that's brought up later on too with Michael, like directions and like associations with memory and feelings. So
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but that makes sense.
yeah, she I guess looking back on her life, there's a lot of things she couldn't control. And so here it just mentions out of all those many things, like she talked about too many things. And out of all those many things, she took the one thing and made it hers, forgiveness. Like something she could have agency over, like, which is not easy. Not an easy thing.
Yeah, I liked. There's a section like right before that, where she talks about forgiveness. I think as well. I think it's her. Hold on. Or 94. Like that last section.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, maybe. Acceptance, never. So like, kind of that idea of forgive but never forget, kind of.
Yeah. When we were talking the other day when we were reading the book, I know I kept on like based on the intro, like I was looking forward to things as well. Like, where's Sammy the cat? Wait, where are the spirits? Aren't there supposed to be ghosts here or something? Like, where are the ancestors? And so they finally kind of really show up on 104. I don't know if anyone had anything related to that section. Even though they did talk about, because even though it's not like explicit, right? Like Michael can hear them earlier on when he's on his walk. Here they're very prominent in this section. Yeah, what do you think about this idea of the spirits dancing in the street?
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me of like, had like Dia de los Muertos vibes,
Yeah, I think it's this spiritual element that Denise is exploring here, like asking us to think more deeply about these mundane moments we may experience, like a wind, right? Or she says in 107, imagine flight and freedom of movement without effort. Imagine colors unseen and a darkness within the darkness. Now imagine a light within a light, a sound within a sound. Imagine hearing the heartbeat of a leaf and the cry of a tree. Imagine, like, just maybe asking us to think more deeply about this. And I think that is referenced later on to a sound within a sound, or something like that, like the sound under the sound. And I guess in this she associates the ancestors with wind and coldness.
Yeah, and then also they're they're in a kind of state of limbo, right? Because they're on 106. Like the spirits saw it all, and they said nothing. They just observed the state of things. That was their penance: to just look, to just see, to just wonder, not to assist or declare or reclaim. They were only able to move from that place they now called home to this earthly place briefly, their former life. gone, but still remembered.
Yeah, and that paragraph ends with like how humans agonized, how humans suffered, how humans cried, but it also kind of shows the agony and like the longing of the spirits that can't have no control, can't do anything, but just look, observe. Yeah, I was kind of expecting the spirits to come in like a maybe not menacing way, but like more actively engaging with the living. I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned in that other scene where like they were looking through the windows or at the bed. And what's that one book that inspired Gabriel Garcia Marquez? It's going to be turned into a series on Netflix, I think. It's like a City of Ghosts 2 kind of thing. Reminded me a little bit of that. I hate that I'm drawing a blank right now. Look it up.
Yeah, do that.
It's like someone. It's a name. It's a name. Like someone's name's 2 P's.
Pedro Paramo.
Yes. That's what I was thinking of.
Oh yeah, that book's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, Gabo always kind of talks about his inspiration. I mean, so as I flip through later on, there's a lot more about like not speaking, the unspoken. People really spoke to each other. They were afraid to speak to each other. It's Linda again, right? I think there's even a section, right, where she's having a memory with a doctor. It's the end, 113. And they brought up that line again of when they spoke, dust rose up and filled their throats. It's pretty heavy metaphor for like feeling voiceless and not being able to say anything. I like this. It's kind of also a different pace and different interaction than the rest. Is Linda reflects on her unlikely friendship with Sen. So I really like that because they talk about like Sen introduced her to some books, which ultimately also I think helps her understand her abuse. Makes me kind of think of like book banning and everything too, right? Like that's tying into.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't want people to get educated on and name their abuse and
yeah, and then it was National Book Ban Week last week, I think. Book ban awareness.
So the wedding dress comes up again on 118. But yeah, it's kind of just like talked about again, but not there isn't really any explanation.
We do learn more though that it was left behind because once Jose dies, San is able to sell the house, right? And she ends up just kind of abandoning it, right, with all her plants, and what was left behind was this dress, enigmatic. You know, maybe it's a symbol for like the unknown. We can't know everything. We can't have knowledge of everything. Maybe.
I think also because, like dresses are, well, not meant, but like there's a tradition of like passing down the dress right to your like daughter or like granddaughter, and doesn't happen.
Plus, its description is like ghostly, ethereal too. So it does have this like haunting presence to it. Because I think it first comes up when like the house, it's like Halloween decorations, right? And then right after they talk about the dress too, that's almost ghost-like. Yeah, she focuses a lot on Linda during these sections here. Because that whole page on 118, I'm also I highlighted a lot. I just feel like just some musings on storytelling and like, we tell our stories so maybe it can even help other people.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of that meta commentary here again. The importance of voicing our story.
Yeah. So as the book kind of like reaches its end, it feels like it picks up like a lot of pacing, and it becomes very heavy-handed in the introspection. Like I think one of the strongest lines in the entire book is on 121. I don't know if anyone has anything before that.
No, my line was on 121.
Is it the sacrificial one? Because there was a point to be made about the children. It's
Yes,
further up than
yeah.
yours, I think. Yeah, because you were talking about that section, like enough of the fathers, about the mothers, and of course it's about the children. So much was placed on the hope of them, and I felt this line here at the top of 121. The story of the children is tragic. They were all sacrificed on the altar of their parents' insecurity and illness, which goes back to the line you mentioned earlier, Reina. Or wait, I forgot the curses of alcohol and yeah.
Yeah.
The demons, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it just like makes you think about like how much is passed on, because like for example alcoholism can be passed on, it's hereditary, and like how hard is it for children especially to break these kinds of cycles, and are we doomed from the beginning? Are we really cursed,
Yeah.
where we are geographically or who we are?
Right.
It's all connected.
Little points of like to mention colonialism, conquest, rape. Like you think a lot of that too with the history.
I was going to bring that up
people.
earlier because, and maybe we can cut this out if you guys don't think.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about like the way that Chicano, that term is used, or like Mexicanos, and this is new Mexicanos, right? That are, that we're following in this book. And I remember meeting New Mexicans because I went to NMSU.
I think I know you're going with this.
And it was like, well, where are you from? El Paso. Oh, and your parents? Oh, from Mexico, And so as soon as they heard that, like, oh, well, I'm of Spanish blood.
Yeah.
And so there was always like that superiority complex that the New Mexicans that I met, that I knew, that were born in New Mexico, but maybe had Mexican parents, they're still like not claiming that side of it. It was still very like Spanish. So yeah, that's
I knew you were going that because I that comes up a little bit too. She even writes out the word acento at one point. I'm like, wait, what?
It's interesting.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind keeping that in, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, because it was just like my experience, and it wasn't every single person, but there was a lot of like I hadn't heard so many people claim their Spanish side. When you said colonialism, I was like, yeah, like I just remember that a lot when I was at NMSU.
Yeah, I kind of have picked up on that a little bit as well in my experience.
What was your line in this page, Vanessa?
It was at the bottom of that paragraph. I'll start right here, I guess. The children who later, I'll start at the sentence before that. The night tells us the stories of the people in the houses that brought forth the broken children. The children who later abused, drank, lied, bullied, killed their dreams willingly and the dreams of others. It is also the street where the children brought forth the other children who abused, lied, drank, bullied, and killed the dreams of their children. And kind of just like that cycle of passing down that same trauma onto the next generation. Yeah.
I feel like the paragraph right after that is more meta commentary. Like, tell them when to stop, tell it to rest, tell it to go to sleep. We're tired and we want to rest. It's late again, and the stories come spilling out like blood from a wound. It's like, all right, we get it. Let's think of the end of 100 Years of Solitude when Melquiades reads the manuscript and like the whole world starts like crumbling in itself, like in a whirlwind and a maelstrom.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of like breaking the fourth wall too, right? And because it's also about the power of telling these stories, telling the truth.
Yeah, that page 122 on the bottom, where it said, who had time to look into their parents' faces and ask them, Mama, tell me your story. Papa, who were your people? Who were they and where did they come from? Who was your mother? What was your father like? No, we didn't have time. Each of us was absorbed with our own separate grief. And just how and what did you imagine your life would become? I wrote like cautionary tale. Like I also just felt like, to go back to what you're saying, Jorge, like so much of this, I mean, it's in the title, is about storytelling and about keeping certain things alive. And if we don't, we know that our spirits, our ancestors will be there, but they can't do much after, you know? So it's like us that need to speak, need to share that truth while we're living and learning about each other.
Yeah, and that ties in with that writing workshop that Denise Chávez led, the one I was talking about in part 1 with Wise Women International, where she wanted us to write about family and their stories and encourage us to talk to them, keep the memories alive in story. 125 is the Spanish acentos. I mean, we're talking about the perception of like Mexicans and adoración, right? Adoración is what Letty's mother, right? Hold on, I gotta go back to the front again. Yeah. But she's also what called Betty Lou. Is that what they call her? Or is that someone else? Anyway, they kept on making a point to say how much she cared for Adelaida, cared for her, and how she made a scene at the funeral in her despair,
Right.
and it threw everyone off. Because I think the other thing mentioned a couple pages earlier is how for a lot of people it was like about keeping up appearances too, and like one of the reasons I guess there was not a whole lot of confrontations on stuff. I don't know, because then also, who is it? Mari, who never leaves the house and watches a lot of soap operas. There's that conversation earlier too about like Mexican novelas versus like English soap operas, like the difference in the. It kind of remind me of that a little bit.
Yeah, the emotions and
Yeah. I thought of that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come back at the end, like some repetition in lines. She was the one who all the dogs knew. That was a line that she had a couple of other times in the book.
Yeah.
Just as an example. But yeah, I think that's part of it, right? It's like the cyclical storytelling.
So a huge departure, like again stylistically, the She Was the One section. I don't know if you guys got up on that.
Yeah. Rena had mentioned that, and this is where I said like it did remind me of Anel Lopez's.
That second person one.
Yeah, second person one.
Yeah, I remember that. That's what I was thinking too.
I liked this chapter. It just felt heavy with like the guilt that she's feeling. But not all of it is her fault, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's things that she experienced and she feels guilty for having experienced. But a lot of things were things that were done to her. And I think that happens a lot with victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse. They just feel very guilty about a lot of things that they experienced, and they put the blame on themselves, which I felt a lot in this chapter.
Yeah, I highlighted that once on 135 of that one line. She was the one who imagined that if she had been born a man, she would have been a good man, not like all the other men she'd met or known. I think in the previous chapter, right, it kind of goes a little bit more in depth on some of some of her mistreatment.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting at the end of it too, how, it's all the anaphora of like she was the one, but then it becomes she was the one, like, the one, right? The capital one.
Yeah, like Neo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh God.
That's what I highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it kind of goes back to like the awakening for the second half of the characters.
Mm.
And it ends with the Dia de los Muertos, right? The day. So you get the spirits, and it's kind of like a jovial mood.
Yeah. I mean, it starts off right with a child running out in the streets yelling Pasajero, and that's the name of the dog that was abandoned. And it's kind of, that's just running around, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other world.
Unbounded by pain.
Yeah.
If you could see it.
I like this idea of the spirits talking to us. Yeah, because it's on 153.
Mm-hmm.
That's, if you could see it, she's talking about the messages, right?
Mm.
Some stayed behind, and then they talked about leaving a feather or a rock or a piece of paper as a note of love, right? And that's, the message, if you can read it, if you can see it. Pretty nice message to end. What do we see and what do we don't see? Why do you think she used the symbol of rain as a way to like end or start or separate sections?
Well, she mentions that in the intro, no?
Mm-hmm.
She talks about using it, but
Yeah.
functionally
Mm-hmm.
as a device.
Rain and its emotional, spiritual, and physical equivalents are what everyone longs for. Respite, blessing, understanding, mercy, and forgiveness.
So symbolically, like raining is like also like a cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
In the Southwest, it's rare, right? So it's for many maybe a blessing, miracle.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot about the flooding, right? Biblical flooding in the region. So it's like cleansing away of the dust,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mm. To heal.
Cleaning, yeah. We need some rain. Come on, rain, please.
Yeah, speaking of rain.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have any questions you might want to ask her if we get a chance to ask? She's going to be speaking at UTEP.
Yeah. I'll keep them to myself, though.
So you listeners, you're going to have to, hopefully we're there.
Yeah, I have to sit with it for a bit longer. Especially kind of thinking about previous books I've read.
Mm.
Because this one was really different.
Yeah, I'd ask her a lot about her process, like how she would sit down and maybe like write chapters sporadically, and then figure out how to weave them in throughout. Because again, it's not chronological. So how she decided to share the...
Yeah. But yeah, so she'll be visiting UTEP Thursday, October 10th at 6 p.m. at the UTEP Library Blumberg Auditorium, which is in the first floor of the library. So it's free, open to all. If you
Which
guys
will
want
probably
to
have
make it
already
out.
happened by the time you're listening to this.
Well, hopefully we'll have this first part out before you
This
guys.
is the second part.
Oh, a second part.
And also, if you think it's statistically, more people will listen to it after the date.
That's true.
Well, either way.
But
But if you're there,
Should be
you're
lookout for
there,
it.
and that's cool.
also she has her bookstore.
Camino
Mention
Real bookstore in Las Cruces. She's very active in the community. And this book you can get from that bookstore or Conocimiento Press from the website. Or support your local bookstore.
Yeah.
As always.
Bookshop also.
Yep.
Yeah, if you pick it up, read it, let us know what you think in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we done?
No, actually,
And you're like, and one more thought. Okay. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Senses. This episode, we continued our discussion on Street of Too Many Stories by Denise Chávez. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode and follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep.